So my name's Nick Askew from Conservation Careers. The topic of the webinar this month is how to find career happiness. And it's something I'm really excited about, actually. It's going to be a really interesting chat. We've got a great panelist here today, a great co-presenter, Dr. Rachel Morris. She's a podcast host of You Are Not a Frog. She's a GP, a doctor as well, and someone who's helped me in my career, actually personally, 4 or 5 years ago. She was a career coach for me, helping me to decide whether I was going to go full-time with Conservation Careers or whether I was going to keep it as a side hustle. Actually, it was through the discussions that we had together and through some of the things we're going to talk about today that she helped me to kind of get more clarity in my career and help me to kind of move forwards and get more happiness. So, and that's what we're going to talk about today, really. So Rachel's here with me now. If it's all right, actually, I might just hand over to you, Rachel. If you can just say hi to the gang and introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. And I'm just seeing people from all over the world. This is just amazing. I'm seeing, Virginia, Canada, Chicago. Wow. This is awesome. So thank you for joining us. So like Nick said, I'm Rachel. I'm a GP turned executive coach, and I now spend a lot of time, I'm still a GP working in the wellbeing space. So I do a lot of training in organizations around resilience, wellbeing. I've created a training course called the Shapes Toolkit to really help people thrive in their work, to feel better, to be more productive, to focus better. And that helps teams and managers. And as part of my coaching work and my training work, I'm really passionate about getting a job that you love, because I think that life's a little bit too short, isn't it, to be stuck and to be miserable. But I'm really passionate about actually helping people find that without having to make these massive life-changing decisions. Actually, I think there's a lot that we can do, in the current life that we have as well. So that's me. That's who I am.
That's great, and it's really good to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to be chatting through how to find career happiness, to be exploring some of the things that's going to help you guys on the line. If you're feeling a little bit stuck or lost in your careers for whatever reason, I think you're going to find the next hour or so really, really exciting, actually, and have some aha moments, hopefully, through some of the things we're going to discuss. So welcome. I'll say a few more welcomes, then I'll give you an overview of the webinar, and then we'll just jump straight into our discussion. So we've got Diego from Colombia. That seems like a pretty good location to be right now. Nicholas in Trinidad and Tobago. Perhaps that wins, I don't know. But it's really great to get you on the line. It's nice to see so many people. I think we've got about 70 people joining us today, which is wonderful. So you've heard who I am, you've heard who Rachel is, you've heard what we're going to discuss today, and it's great to hear you guys as well. What we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of, Rachel and I will have a chat. We'll talk around some themes and topics, which we're going to hopefully find really important and interesting for you guys about how to find career happiness. And then we're going to have some space at the end for questions and answers as well. Okay, so if you've got questions that pop up during the show, feel free to kind of hold on to them, and at the end we'll throw open to you guys. You can ask questions in the chat wall. I'll try and skim through questions as well towards the end as well, so feel free to drop them in as we go, but we will make sure there's space at the end there as well for your questions, to make sure you can kind of share your views. Right, okay, well let's kick things off then. So we're here to talk about career happiness. People sometimes set off in a career direction. I often think, when you kind of go to school, you choose your exams sometimes kind of determine your degree, and before you know it, you can kind of be stuck within a job and a career path that maybe isn't quite right for you, and maybe you learnt things along the way but kind of got a little bit sidelined. So let's start by kind of, I guess, framing things, if we can then, Rachel. So like what kind of, if people are feeling a bit stuck, or if they're not totally happy in their careers right now, why might that be? Why might people be unhappy? Like what could we kind of share around that?
It's really interesting you say about the exams that you choose and what you do through school. I mean, I'm a really great example of that, because I'm a girl who liked science in the 1990s. There wasn't a lot for me to do, because I also like people, so I went into medicine, and I thought that was the only thing I could do. So I identified that I just couldn't really think of what else was out there, to be honest. But I think people get stuck for a number of reasons, and I call these the happiness traps that we get ourselves in a bit of a rut. And I think there's a few things that we fall into. That the first one, I think, is that money is everything, and I think we often don't take the risks that we need to, or we don't, look and really pay attention to what's making us thrive, because actually we're in it for the money. And that sounds dreadful, but actually, let's face it, we all need to eat, and we all need to exist, and we all need to feed our families. So actually money is important, don't get me wrong, but when we actually find ourselves being trapped into a career because of the money, and I do see people that have got used, quite frankly, to spending a lot of money, so got used to a lifestyle in which they can't keep up, and no matter how much they had, they'd always be spending a little bit more. So I think sometimes, actually, in order to get ourselves out of the trap, we need to think, actually, what do I actually need? Do I need that new car? Do I need that 3 different skiing holidays, or would it be better in a job that I enjoy better, which is maybe slightly lower paid? So it's a bit of an uncomfortable truth there, but I think money, whilst it is important, it's not everything. And if we get trapped into that, then actually, we probably need less than we think we do in order to survive, in order to be happy. I don't know, have you found that?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that money doesn't make people happy. Not that I'm a particularly wealthy man, but yeah, I think there is a belief around that if I earn more, I'm therefore going to be more happy. I think there's a certain level at which money is needed to provide for basic, requirements and for things you want to do, but beyond which it's not fulfilling you. Yeah. If we're spending so much time in our lives doing our job, we might as well find the job that makes us truly happy and provides enough.
Absolutely. And there have been all sorts of studies about, income related to happiness. And, you need enough income to meet your basic needs. And then if you double or treble it, it does not double or treble your happiness.
Right. So it's finding where the curve plateaus out.
Absolutely. It's probably lower than most of us think. So I think number 1, money is everything. Number 2, work should be a chore, or work is supposed to be a chore. I think maybe a lot of us have grown up thinking, oh, it's just work, I shouldn't be enjoying it anyway. I think that's plain wrong. Like you said, we spend so many hours at work that if we enjoy it, if we're happy, we are going to be much better at it. And again, there's lots of evidence about happiness and productivity, and we're going to be much better at our jobs if we're happy and if we're enjoying it. And also, one person's chore is another person's dream job. So just because you find it a chore doesn't mean that there'll be no one else who's happy to come and do it. There'll be people who actually love what you're doing, and you just need to find what you enjoy. So it doesn't have to be a chore. And something I see a lot in doctors is thinking that stress is normal. Okay. Then actually, I'm in this job and I'm working really hard and everyone's stressed. I mean, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're this or that, stress is normal. Actually, it's not. I reminded a story, a physiotherapist saw a friend of mine. A friend had been running and she went to see the physio. She said, oh, I'm injured, but of course I'm a runner. Everyone gets injured. It's normal to be injured when you run. And the physio said, no, it's not. It's not normal to be injured. Not normal to be stressed and to be on the edge of burnout. And actually, we know that our physiology changes a lot when we're stressed. It's really bad for our health, and shortens your life expectancy, causes all sorts of physiological problems, cardiovascular problems, increases your risk of cancer, all those sorts of things. Actually, stress is not normal. And I think we sometimes fall into that trap going, well, it is just, this is what I do, and this is how it is.
Interesting. Yeah.
So a lot of us also fall into the trap of I should or I ought. So because I have trained for these many years, I should just stay in, right? I ought to see it through. But for me, a few years ago, I turned 40 and I realized, well, I still had another 25 years in work. And saying I should or I ought to stay in a job or a place where I perhaps wasn't enjoying, well, what am I doing to my 25 years left? So actually, often the biggest shoulds and oughts come from ourselves, not from other people. So if you find yourself thinking that, I think just go, is that one of the happiness traps I'm falling into?
And it reminds me of something I heard about called the fallacy of sunken costs, which is, I think, the same thing, which means I've been doing this for ages, therefore I need to keep doing it. It's actually often, if you're finding it a chore, if you're feeling stressed, and you're just chasing, more and more money, perhaps it is time to pivot and try something else, and move away from that thing.
Absolutely. It's cost me this much already, therefore I'm going to keep paying. Actually, you'd save more if you stopped it where it, after paying all this thing up. Yeah. HS2.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, bit political, bit topical.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a big railway here in the UK that's costing billions and billions, right? Yeah.
Anyway, okay. And then I think another reason why we stay in a job that's not particularly happy, it's actually easier to stay with the status quo than it is to make a change. So this rut I'm in, I might not be happy in it, but it's my rut and I know where it goes and I'm certain about it. And does it matter if I'm here for another year, or does it matter if I'm just not particularly happy? I can deal with it, So it's actually to make a change, it's quite a big thing. It's quite a big deal. It gets us out of our comfort zone. So actually, it takes quite a lot of effort. But I mean, I believe it's definitely worth it, but I think that can be one reason why we get stuck, because it is quite a bit of effort to even get on and make a change. And I guess by being on this webinar today, you've got a group of people who are already going, actually, I maybe don't want to be in this rut, but I mean, I do want to get out. So that's the first step.
It's sort of acknowledging that fact and owning it. Yeah, that you want to make a change, and these things that are maybe holding you back and creating a sense of unhappiness and unfulfillment in your career can be overcome, and there are other directions to take. Yeah.
So those are the main reasons why I think people probably just stay in jobs that they don't feel that they're thriving in.
Yeah, and an interesting one there was number 2, actually sort of mentioned about work should be a chore. It's like a belief that work should be hard. It can be a bit of a grind, and you have to kind of get through it. And that for some people, the same piece of work can be really interesting, exciting. For others, it can be a real slog. Like what makes that difference between those two things? Like one activity can be different experiences for two people.
Well, I think it all comes down to strengths and skills.
Right.
So, and strengths work is something I've sort of come to quite recently, and it's just made a phenomenal amount of difference in my life. And when you look at your strengths, what you're looking at is obviously the things that you're good at, and all of us are good at different things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, probably traditionally what we've done is relied on feedback from people to tell us what we're bad at or not so good at, and we've really worked on those things. So, we thought, well, I'm not so good at maybe communicating with my colleagues, I'm going to work on that. I'm not so good at spreadsheets, I'm going to learn how to do them, whatever. Mm-hmm. Actually, the research shows if we put effort into working on our strengths, we've got a far bigger return than if we put effort into working on our weaknesses.
Interesting.
So, I'm useless at Excel spreadsheets, and I could spend a long time trying to do that. And I could probably get to be okay at it. But actually, having done a few strength surveys, I know that one of my strengths is communicating ideas. And actually, if I spend the same amount of effort working on that, then actually my performance is going to be much, much better than if I spent time working on my weaknesses. So I think focusing on your strengths and working as much in your zone of strength as you can means that actually you'll be enjoying what you do. Because if you're good at something, you often enjoy it. If you enjoy it, you're often no good at it. It's a sort of virtuous circle. So, I think if you're finding something a chore, it's probably because, it's not your main strength. You might be quite proficient at it, but actually what you want to do, I mean, the holy grail for me is being in a job where I use my strengths, and it gets me into this thing called flow. So flow is where time stands still, you're really engaged in a task, you can't think about anything else, and it's really challenging, but it's really interesting. And you could be there for 5 hours and it feels like 5 minutes. And I think if you're working in your skill zone, if you're working towards in your strengths, then that's a really sweet spot.
And what is flow? Have you got an example of a flow moment for you that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, well, so lots of different things can get people into flow. It was Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi was a psychologist who initially described flow, and it's supposed to, if you're in situations where you regularly get into what's known as flow, you have a quite high amount of life satisfaction. So he was describing some research they'd done with this guy who got into flow when he was trading on the stock floor, when he was just in all the numbers or whatever. People can get into flow while they're playing a musical instrument or while they're playing a team sport or a game. So that's a really good way to get into flow. I can get into flow personally when I'm in a really good coaching conversation, or actually when I love speaking. So if I'm speaking, that can get me into flow. Other people, it might be, I don't know, doing some pottery or, really working with some figures or something. But it's very individual. If you want to do something that will really quickly get you into flow, then learn a new skill. That will be the fastest thing.
Interesting.
I always say, learn something just for the sake of it. That will get you into flow straight away, a language or some sort of thing. Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. And we've explored flow as well, actually, through Conservation Careers and some of the courses that we've done in the past. And it's really interesting to kind of spot patterns across flow moments with people, encouraging people to find 4, 5, 6, 7 flow moments and say, well, what's the recurring theme? Because that tells you something about yourself. Are you always outside or inside with people on your own? Like, what's the pattern?
Yeah, it's really, really important, because we are all individual. I spent a long time beating myself up that I wasn't like that person who seemed to be really good at that and really enjoyed it. I was a really bad person because I didn't enjoy that. But actually, I'm different. Like, other people don't like standing up and speaking in front of 1,000 people. I love it. And most people go, do you? But, we're all different, and that is fine.
That's
and
the
it's good.
key. Yeah. So if we're all different and we like different things and we thrive within different careers and jobs and roles, how can people find the right role for them? Have you
Mhm.
got any advice about, actually starting to kind of step back a little bit in their careers and exploring, or where might more happiness be within their potential career journey?
I think there's a few things that you need to take into consideration. And the first one is what we've just been talking about, your strengths.
Hmm.
So I think I would be working quite hard to really nail down what my strengths are. So firstly, getting feedback from people,
Hmm.
actually, what do I do that's good that I should do more of? What do I should do less of? That's always quite helpful too.
Yeah.
But actually, an actual strength survey can be quite helpful, and there are free online strength surveys that you can do. There's one, Authentic Happiness. If you Google Authentic Happiness Strength Survey, that's the one that Martin Seligman has, and that's free on their website. You just have to log in.
Hmm.
And that will give you quite a detailed report of your top 5 strengths. So you
Wow.
can start to think about actually and look at it, go, oh, is that me? Is that not me? And there's all sorts of other things like the Gallup strengths survey is really good as well. So, so actually just doing and maybe paying to get that done can be quite helpful.
And by strengths, do we mean like skills or talents, or how would you sort of define a strength? What we talk about?
So a strength, well, each of the surveys define their own list of strengths.
Okay.
Um, so they don't have things like making a pot or cooking. That would be to me more of a skill, and a skill is sort of a practical thing that you can do and you can learn.
Hmm.
Whereas strengths tend to be more things like communicating or teaching or
Hmm.
collaborating or spirituality, being connected. So these are almost more characteristics than actually things that you can do.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in the fact that skills can always be learned.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
so
But
I can't.
strengths come from within. Is that where you're?
I I think, and I think strengths come from within, and we're all unique, and but we can always get better at our strengths.
Yeah.
Skills are something that probably with enough practice you will just get. If I can't do pottery. I tried to do pottery because I was hopeless. But actually, if I did 1,000 hours of pottery, I could probably manage to throw quite a good cup by the end of it,
Yeah.
because that's a skill that you just have to learn by practicing. I think strengths are probably more to do with what you really love and you enjoy and your innate characteristics.
Right, great. So number one, explore yourself, look at your strengths, and there's some
Yeah.
good tools out there. And we'll link to the notes when we share this video too. That's great.
And then, likewise, explore your skills as well. Because if there is already something you're really good at, then you
Hmm.
can use that as well. So what are your strengths? What are your skills? And then what are your areas of interest? What do you, and knowledge, what do you know about? Because if you have spent 20 years in a particular industry, you've probably got quite a lot of expert knowledge
Hmm.
that could well be transferable to another area, or that other people may well like to know about.
Hmm.
So, through 20 years of working in the health service, I have a lot of knowledge about well-being and health. I just have that other people wouldn't have had if they hadn't gone through medical school, for example. So,
Hmm.
that's just what I have. That's an area of knowledge. It doesn't mean that I have to apply it in certain areas, but it's something that I can use in whatever area I want.
Hmm.
So that you work out what your interests are and what your knowledge is, but then you need to work out what you're really passionate about, what do you enjoy.
Hmm.
Because you might know all about blah XYZ, but you might not be that interested in it. And this for me was quite a revealing thing when I did my career change, in that I thought to myself, I was really beating myself up because I had a pile of sort of journals next to my desk that were this high, and they just were completely unread. Whereas some of my colleagues were really fascinated and quoting the latest papers and this and that and the other. And I was thinking, is there something wrong with me? And then I realized that next to the other side of my bed was this pile of sort of books on well-being and productivity and sort of self-help and coaching. They were this high, and I read all of them. And people would say to me, God, Rachel, do you ever stop reading? So I did. I read all the time, but it wasn't the medical journals. It was all the stuff of sort of more the psychology type thing. I was like, oh, that was a real light bulb moment. It's like, oh, that's what I'm interested in and I'm
Right.
passionate about. Although I would, a bit of caution, and I don't know what your thoughts are about passion, because I think a lot of people really beat themselves up about, oh, I don't really have any passions. What's my passion? I've got to go and find it. And I think if you have a real passion, then you're very fortunate. You know where you want to go. Most of us are quite interested in lots of different things. And it's quite difficult to say, I've got one passion going in this direction. And I read a really good article from the Harvard Business Review, and they talked about following your interest, and then your passions will develop. And that's definitely what's happened to me. I was interested in the psychology of living well and thriving, and I followed that interest, and that has developed into a real passion.
That's great advice. Yeah. And I love this idea of like, what is it you read? What do you consume? What draws your attention? That tells you something about, like, these flow moments again, like these automatically tell you something about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're someone who likes picturing things, if you picture all of these in sort of a Venn diagram of different circles and things that we're starting to get circles that overlap, things that I know about, things that I'm skilled at, things that my strengths, things that I'm interested in or passionate about. Mm-hmm. That's well and good. You've got all this stuff about you, but then you need to think, actually, what does the world need? Mm-hmm. Because, I love singing. I absolutely love singing, and I'm okay at it, but I'm not the world's best singer. And the world really doesn't need a sort of slightly mediocre singer like me. The world doesn't need another singer. They've got enough brilliant singers. So I could try and pursue that as a career, but I don't think I would get very far. So, there are some people that say, but I'm passionate about it in this, and you think, but actually it's not solving anyone's problem.
Right.
It's not adding to it. It's a passion for you, but actually does the world need it? Because if you're not solving anyone's problem, making their life better, making things better, then actually maybe it's just a hobby, as it were, or it's just sort of an interest that you've got. So I think it definitely has to be something that the world needs. And actually, what we think the world needs and what the world actually needs might be a bit different. So I think this is somewhere where you might need to go and do a little bit of research and get out and talk to people.
Right. Okay. So you might be assuming there's this ideal job that fits everything that you've brought to the table, your skills and your passions and your strengths. Yeah. But actually, it might be quite tough to get paid for that thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that might be something that's best kept as a hobby or something that's a volunteer or something like that. And that's something actually that you and I talked about 4 or 5 years ago when you were coaching me. We sort of looked across everything, and things like flow moments for me is woodworking. I love making tables and chairs and doors and whatever. As long as it's in wood, I'm more than happy. I love doing that. But I couldn't sort of marry that very cleanly with conservation and everything that I'm really interested in terms of helping people. So you helped me to sort of see that viewing my life as a whole, which is a career and my hobbies and interests, and they can be separate things, but viewing the whole container being my life, then things start to fit together a bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. So often we think we've got to find our entire happiness in our job.
Yeah.
But we forget about the rest of the time when we're not in our job. And often the job gives us bits of stuff, but we need to find the other bits outside of work, or vice versa. Outside of work, we get these things. We need to find that bit of satisfaction inside of work. Yeah, you just need to look at it as a whole and think, actually, what do I need out of which bits? And like you said, what does the world need? Now, what the world needs, they won't always pay you for. And I'm afraid that's a little bit of an inconvenient truth.
Unless you're extremely creative. Yeah, but there are some things that are best kept as hobbies. Yeah.
Yeah. And if the world won't pay you for it, then do keep it. I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, absolutely do it and do it to a high standard, but you might need to find a different career that's going to pay you while you pursue your hobby.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I find that really valuable. I mean, it's almost like quite obvious actually, what goes where, what goes in your career, what goes in your personal life, so on and so forth. But that to me was quite a kind of penny drop moment. Okay, I'm going to keep some things to one side and just do it in my time, and other things I'm going to try and fold into my career and keep that as, where I spend my professional life. Yeah.
And then you never know, actually. You never know when these things will come back and someone will pay you to do it, or someone does need it. It's amazing how things just come together.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Another thing I wanted to ask you as well is, so if people are unhappy, and we've explored, why might that unhappiness be there and the beliefs that people are holding on to, we've also discussed, what sort of things should people think about when considering a career change that's going to help them to make better decisions going forwards. Have you got any practical advice on things that people could do, in the immediate term, over the next, 30 days or so, that is going to help them to move towards greater career happiness. Now, we're not saying everyone's going to change their careers within the next 30 days. Some might. I hope you do. I hope you find greater happiness for that. But what practical steps could people be taking, straight away during these lockdown COVID times? Are there things that people could be thinking about?
So I think there's some stuff that you can do certainly to explore you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you've got to start. There's no point just getting out there and going. In fact, this is what I did. I just went, right, I'm going to get out there. And I went to talk to loads of people. I remember this woman saying to me, "That's great, Rachel. I mean, you've got loads of really great skills. What do you want?" And I was like,
right.
I don't know what I want. It's like, well, she said, until you know what you want, you're not going to find it.
Right.
Quite a good point. So explore yourself. Find out, if you can, do a strengths survey. Find out, there's all sort of books about strengths, or you can get a coach, or you can do the online surveys. Find out what really makes you tick. And looking back on your past career and working out the times where you were really in flow and there's really good moments, and the times where you were really miserable, can often be quite helpful as well. And the way I do that is basically you just get a timeline, and you've got a y-axis above the x-axis, and the positive y-axis is positive things that were good, and the negative is things that are bad. And so you can sort of plot, I qualified, and then I had a bit, hated that job there, and then it was better, and then then I had very small children that made me absolutely knackered, and then blah, blah, so you sort of go along.
I know that very well right now. Yeah.
So, and actually and then you look back at it and you think, actually, what was it about that job that I really loved?
Right.
And it might have been, I was working as a team, or it might be, actually, I was working on my own. So look back and see if you can identify some of these peaks and the troughs. And the troughs, I mean, of course, a lot of the troughs might be to do things completely not to do with your job, your family things, or stuff that life has thrown at you. But quite a lot of it, you might think, I was really down at that point. That's because I had a boss I didn't respect, or that's because I had a really long commute. So you actually start to see what the really important stuff is. So that is a really good exercise to do. And if you can debrief that, even just with a partner or a friend, or a coach, anyone to just help talk that through, that can be really powerful. So
it almost gives you like two lists, like a positive and a negative, things to try and avoid and things to do more of.
Yeah. And you could, in the moments, keep a diary, like you said, this flow diary of, in the next week, I'm just going to keep every sort of half an hour, I'm going to note down what I'm doing, and whether it's a happy, sad, smiley face or not, how am I feeling right now? And then work out, there's some sort of pattern. It might be that I've just had 3 meetings back to back and I'm feeling really exhausted, and I've just spent an hour just writing and I really feel energized. Or it might be the other way around, that could be really quite helpful. And then, explore yourself more. You could do Myers-Briggs profiles, all sorts of sort of personality profiles that will help and may point you towards the sort of thing that you want to look for. So just exploring more about you, I think is really, really important. So there's that one. And then actually taking stock of where you are at the moment in your job. And we were talking about this thing called the performance diamond earlier. And this, again, it's just a little diagram. Again, you have like a cross, so it's 4 quadrants. And on one axis, you have to have 0 in the middle and you have 10 at the end. So it's like the wheel of life or star. But you can use whatever things on each of the grid lines that you want to. But I've seen it done where you've got, and this is what I use in my coach, you've got achievement at the top. You've got enjoyment at the side, you've got purpose at the bottom, and you've got learning on one side and on the other side. And if you're scoring quite highly in all of those areas, you're probably really quite happy in your job.
Interesting.
If you do that and you find actually you're scoring maybe 1 or 2 in certain areas, it could be that you're not learning enough, or it could be you're just not enjoying it, or it could be that actually you can't see the purpose and the impact of what you're doing. Or you might not be achieving, you might not be recognized. That's quite good at just helping you see where the problem is. And it may be for some people, they're in a job that they don't actually need to leave their job at all, but actually going and doing a course and getting upskilled and learning a bit so that they get a bit better and achievement mastery will really help them just enjoy what they're doing. So I'm quite a big fan of not saying, right, that's it, everything's got to change, but actually looking at what are the small things I can do right now in the job that I'm in to make it better. And there might not be very many things, but there might be some really quite significant things. And I think you can actually job craft within the job that you are. Organizations have all sorts of roles for different people, and maybe just changing roles or doing something different where you are will be the best thing for you.
I love that. So it's almost like there might be an imbalance within your current role, which can be fixed, that could address things and provide more happiness. And when you sort of describe it, and you sort of showed it on screen earlier, it's quite nice. You can sort of see the axis and how when you plot things out, you sort of make that diamond or kite shape, whatever it might be. And the idea is it should be fairly balanced. Is that right? Does it all have to be 10? Is that what you're aiming for? Or is it just?
No, it doesn't all. I think if you've got all 10, then that's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I think, you'll find that if one is a bit out of balance, it probably starts to pull the rest down.
I see.
So I think it's very difficult to get if you've got a 1 in purpose, then I can't imagine that your enjoyment's going to be that high, is it? You probably maybe get a 3 or 4, so I think if one seems to be really, really low, then often it pulls some of the other ones down as well. And you end up with a really teeny tiny diamond because you're getting 3s and 2s and 3s all around. Actually, you're looking for a nice, even, big diamond. So it just helps. I mean, I see this, like I said, I do lots of work with doctors as well as, professionals in high stress jobs. And you see this with doctors, and particularly sort of GPs say, well, I'm a doctor. What else can I do? I'm just stuck here in this job. And I and we look at it, and actually there's lots of things you can do within the job. You can take on a teaching role, or you can get a special interest in a particular area, or you can take some management responsibility, or you can do some but there's actually even in the most narrow roles, there's often ways in which you can diversify. And I think diversifying is so important because, in particular roles, particularly when you're doing a lot of service delivery. So if you're just a doctor seeing patients, or you're a teacher, just teaching, it can get quite monotonous, and you can find you're only using certain amounts of your strengths and your skills. If you go, oh, you know what, I'll just take responsibility for this team, or maybe I'll write the weekly newsletter, suddenly you're using a different bit of your brain. You might be connecting with different people within the organization, and things just become more interesting.
Yeah. And it feels like quite a nice strategy as well. Like if you're unhappy right now, try and within your current context, within your current job, whatever it might be, try and find greater happiness by, let's call it, plug in the gaps, making it more balanced. And I find that really valuable. Yeah. And then at the same time as doing that, think about more broadly, are there other things, other careers you'd like to move towards? That sort of plan A, plan B type thing. Immediate term, try and make yourself more happy. Longer, medium term, what is it you'd like to move towards, having learned about yourself through some of the exercises you've shared?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to try stuff out. And actually, if you're in a job already, then you can try stuff out. Oh, let me try writing that blog for the company, or let me try doing this, because actually you're in that job. So it's I read a lot of stuff which I didn't find quite helpful about forget plan A or forget plan B. You've got to have just one plan A. Right. You've got to put your heart and soul into it and all your eggs in one basket and go for it. Now, I think that's really hard when you're doing a career change, because I don't know many people that said, right, I'm here, I know I want to be absolutely over there, and I'm going for it. And this is how I get there. Most people's career change has been, what's around this? I'll do this. And then through doing that, I found out I really like that. And I've ended up there. I would never have predicted, because I didn't even know it existed. And it's certainly that's happened with me. I would never have predicted I'd be doing what I'm doing now. But it's through all the different steps that I took and things that I tried out. Now, it's easier to try stuff out and to fail, because actually failing is good. Failing just gives you feedback about things that don't work. It's easier if you actually have a little bit of plan B going on. If you have some regular income or something that you can fall back on, so that you're just taking away the stress, particularly if you're the main breadwinner, I think that's sensible, actually. And I think it gives you a bit more freedom. I mean, you do have to be careful it doesn't hold you back from doing what you want, but I would say do things in increments whilst you test stuff out.
There's this idea of like a side hustle nowadays. You've got your main gig, which is your main income, whatever it might be. And for me, conservation careers was a side hustle for the first couple of years or so. We then sort of transitioned across. So that was certainly been my experience too. And I would certainly, encourage others to do that as well.
Yeah.
If people are, so we talked through acknowledging unhappiness, where that might come from. We talked about understanding yourself a bit better. And you shared some really kind of practical tools as well that people can do for kind of greater self-discovery and trying to identify a better path for themselves. Having kind of brought some of this together, what could people do to kind of give their ideal job a name? Are there any sort of practical steps that would allow people to say, well, I've learned this and this about myself. I like this. I don't like that. These are my strengths. Is there anything that we could share that practically to help people actually sort of tangibly put a name on a job that would give them more happiness?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you need to do. Firstly, you might not know what that is, and you just got to go find out. So I'm going to mention the N word, I'm afraid, the networking words. And I know this strikes the fear of God into people, and they're like, I don't know it. But all networking is, it's talking to people. So go find out what other people are doing and quiz them about it. So this is not you going up to them going, hello, would you like to employ me? I think I'm going to be a very good employee for you. It's about going, you all look something quite interesting. Can I buy you a coffee and just pick your brains about it? So you'll go, you'll ask them what they like about their job, what they don't like about it, what the hours are like, what the best things, what the worst things are. And 9 times out of 10 at the end, they'll go, oh, you know what, you should talk to so-and-so. And they'll give you someone else to talk to. And so that for me was so powerful. And I think there's a really good career change book that I think we've both got called What Colour Is Your Parachute?
It's behind me at the moment. I've got it.
Is it down there?
We were talking about it earlier, but there you go. No commission.
Yeah, and it talks about how to network, and you just make a list of everyone who is working in or around something that you might be interested in. Even if it's not exactly the right thing, just go talk to them, because they still might have some interesting stuff. I learned an awful lot about people, and you're making connections. If you're an intelligent, warm human being that's asking them intelligent questions, they'll often then recommend you to other people and put you in contact with their networks. And you just find out, and you decide, out of that sounded interesting. And I don't know about you, Nick, but a lot of jobs I've been offered haven't even been advertised.
Right.
No, sort of, I know that might not be the same in conservation, but often people say, well, there might be a job coming up in a few months' time. Actually get back to me about that. So you're just putting yourself out there, and you're trying stuff. So I think just making the simple thing you can do in the next 30 days is make a list of everybody you know and what they do. And if any area is even if it's maybe someone who's in marketing and they're working for a car factory and you want to be in bird conservation, go talk to the marketing person, because it's the same set of skills that you've got to use, and they will be able to just give you some insight into what it's about.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah, and I always think of networking. It does feel like a dirty word and something that people don't like, but I try and think of it as making friends, because that seems like an easier thing to do. Just go out, find interesting people that you would like to that you'd like to learn more about their careers. And we talk to a lot of professional conservationists through Conservation Careers. We do podcasts, we do interviews, this, that, and the other, and we haven't had anyone say no yet to being, when we ask them, can we talk about your job? It's quite flattering, actually, if all you want to do is find out what it's like to do their job, and warts and all, and maybe get some advice off the back of it. And that final question, like, who else should we speak to, is probably the best question you can ask, because that is just going to keep that route going. Yeah.
And just go and listen. So don't go wanting to talk about yourself. That is not the aim of any of this. Is to listen to them, ask them intelligent questions, and then that question at the end, is there anyone else I could be talking to, or you would recommend that I speak to?
Yeah.
And most people, especially if you buy them a cup of coffee, people like talking about themselves. So I think it's, most people will.
That's great advice. Yeah. Another piece of advice which I heard also around this is share with people. And social media is actually a good place for doing this. Like, share with people what you've learned about yourself, and saying what job title might suit me quite well, and just try and kind of pull the ideas from friends and family and others. Get more brains on the problem, if you like, because some ideas might just pop out that you've never even thought of before, jobs you didn't even know existed that could suit you quite well, that someone within your social sphere might already have to hand, if you like. So, and that could again lead to a networking opportunity. So sort of ask. The
idea
around.
is that sort of Venn diagram we talked about, the flower with I'm good at, my skills, what the world needs, blah blah blah. You should end with this little area in the middle that's almost like your sweet spot. That's it. It's this and it's here.
But what's that job called?
Yeah. Sometimes, and my experience of sort of particularly people who are switching mid-career, there might not be that job actually with the name on it. You sort of have to go and make a job your own.
Mm-hmm.
So often you're in an organization and then suddenly you're doing all sorts of stuff you'd never thought of, but you started out doing one thing, but because you've been good and because you've been proactive about stuff and making suggestions and stuff, then you suddenly find yourself doing all sorts of things.
Yeah. No, that's great. And then I guess finally, you know, making your own job as well. You know, there wasn't a careers advisor for conservationists before. So, you know, and yet it matched a lot of what I was, you know, trying to achieve. So we sort of, you know, created this job, you know, myself, I guess. And there are lots of examples of people who have done that, you know, found a job around themselves, their interests, their skills and backgrounds, and could go that way. Yeah.
And I think it's important to, and the final thing I was gonna talk about is
Mm-hmm.
actually you design your life or your work around your life, not the other way around.
Mm.
So you don't say, you know, so some jobs, you know, I can imagine, I'm guessing here in conservation, actually some jobs you've got to spend 3 months away in an exotic or somewhere away from the family, just watching or observing, you know, often it's on location away. But actually, if you've got a small family, that's probably, well, maybe you're going to choose to do that. I don't know.
Sounds ideal. No.
That might not work for you. You might have geographical ties. So you need to actually think, what do I want my week to look like here?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something we don't do very much. And so I have a tool, and we'll give the link out for it at the end if you'd like to.
Yep.
It's just literally a diagram of your week.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to be doing in that week? How many afternoons do you want to have off? How many evenings do you want to be working or not? Do you want to have a hobby? Do you want to, you know, all those sorts of things, and put them in? Because, you know, when I do this quite a lot with doctors, and sometimes I find that they're committed to like 6 days work in 5 days, and they've come to me for coaching because they really want to be able to have a day off. And we put down everything they've committed to in this week. We go, how are you going to do that? Because actually you're overcommitted here because you're doing things off the side of the desk. And I think not only for working out what you want your job to look like, but actually job searching takes quite a long time. It takes quite a lot of energy. And so you might need to free up a little bit of time in your current work or your current life to really get your head into this and put some effort and energy into this. So you can use your Thrive Week planner maybe to block off an afternoon a week or a couple of hours a week to really start to look into all of this and just really look into it as a project rather than just something I'll get around to at some point. Because I think if you view it like that, probably nothing will ever change.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, and I think realizing that when you say yes to something, you say no to something else as well. There's only so much time, isn't there, in the day? So yeah.
100%. And most of us are overcommitted and committed to too many things. And, you know, the number one thing I talk about with resilience and thriving in life and work is to simplify and just to focus on a couple of really important things rather than 20 things, which just dilutes your focus.
Yeah, great. Well, that's been so valuable. You know, I've really enjoyed it as well. I think it's probably time we kind of threw open to the crowd. I can see already a couple of questions that have come in. What I might ask people, it can use the question button, Q&A button, rather than the chat wall. So if you're listening, that would be a great place to be putting your questions, and then we can kind of read them in one place there. We've got one in from Robbie Mann. Robbie, hello. He's a friend of the show, a friend of me. Good to hear from you. So you've asked, hi Rachel and Nick, in all the career changing or leaping, developing mentoring you've delivered, what common denominator strength did those who successfully persisted, did they have? Does that make sense? Are there any kind of particular strengths that you think stand out from people who have been, you know, quite successful, Rachel?
I can't think of a particular strength because I think we've all got different strengths and all of them can be very successful. But I think one thing I have noticed is people that are proactive, who don't see themselves as victims of circumstance and then there's nothing they can do, but people who see themselves as in control of their own destiny and take control over the things that they can take control of and actually forget about the things they can't take control of. So it's people that go out and proactively look. The one I often coach people and they say, well, I really want to have a job a day a week working there, but they've never advertised anything. And I'll say to them, well, have you gone and had a coffee with the director of studies, for example, to chat about anything coming up? No, I don't. Well, can I do that? It's like, yes. The first, you know, there's somewhere you really love to work. Go and get to know them. Don't just wait till something's advertised.
Mm-hmm.
Go and pick their brains, go volunteer, go get to get to know people. So I think being proactive is probably the I don't know if that is a character strength or not, but it's one thing I've seen. What about, I mean, have you seen anything in particular?
I think persistence, yeah, sort of stands up. Gosh, what are the character traits? I think just being open, being both open to ideas, open to suggestions, open to other people, which I guess is related, but I think it really helps. So, just sort of spotting opportunities, spotting things that might be out there, and seeing things optimistically. Yeah, I think probably takes you quite far. So just watching. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robbie. And it's nice to hear from you. I hope you're well. I can see a few more questions coming in too. So that's wonderful. What do we have here? So, Beth, sorry, I'll go to the top and work my way down. So, and I'm really sorry if I say your name wrong. Apologies. Morinoin. I'm really sorry. That's awful. I'm quite early in my career, 2 years experience. I know what I want to get into, but don't have specific. Let me put that live so you can read it too. But I don't have specific experience other than limited voluntary and some online courses. How do I go about getting into this? So I'm quite early in my career, 2 years. I know what I want to get into, but you don't have specific experience other than limited voluntary experience and online courses. How do you go about getting into it? Any suggestions, Rachel, for
I would identify someone who's doing what you want to do, and go talk to them. Say, how do you get into it? And then do whatever you can, volunteer, offer to write blogs for them, get involved with them on social media. I think just communicating and talking to them and making yourself helpful to them, serving them in some way can be really, really good idea. I think that's
And I think the hardest step actually is identifying the sort of job you want to do. So it feels like you've already taken quite a big leap there. You know what that job might be. My advice on top of Rachel's would be to go off and actually find, say, half a dozen job descriptions for your chosen area. So advertisements, so they might even be closed just from the past, but find them in the archives. Look to see what employers are looking for when hiring. So they look, they set out their essential desirable criteria. Okay, do a bit of a review of them and just ask yourself, how well aligned are you to them? What do you have, in great strength, but what are your weaknesses? Fill those gaps, fill those weaknesses, and then you're truly employable. And that, along with the networking that Rachel suggested, I think will then put you in a really employable position. It's just time to put in really good applications and go for it. So find your gaps, and fill them. Thank you. That's great. Daphne, how do you get to that proactive state of mind? What if you think that you don't have experience or knowledge? And so I'll read it again. I'll just click the button. So how do you get into that proactive state of mind? What do you think that you don't have the experience or knowledge that you required for the area you want to get to? Sorry.
So I would say find out how you can get the experience and the knowledge. And a lot of the time you only get it by working somewhere. So go somewhere if you can get in and you want to be there, but there's only an opening here and it's something you'd like to do. Go in, show up, work consistently and get that experience. I mean, I do remember there was something on Facebook or LinkedIn recently. It was some sort of elder statesman who talks about the people that have done well and they've really impressed them. And actually 99% it's the people that show up consistently and just do a good job with what they're given, that turn up on time to work, that do all those things about being a diligent employee. So doing your best in whatever job you've got and getting that experience wherever you can. So think about picking someone's brains, because the people that, like I just said in the other answer, the people that are doing that job there, well, they started off like you with no experience. How did they get it? That's what you need to know.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, and thank you for your question. Let's go to Jenny McCarthy. Hi, Rachel, Nick. Is there a way to tell the difference between something you are just not good at, i.e. Rachel's spreadsheet, and something you just need more practice at?
That's a really good question. I think I would first of all go for feedback from other people. You can get them to be really honest. Say, what have you noticed that I'm good at? What could I get better at? What do I naturally get drawn to? And actually, I think with a growth mindset, I think most of us get good at most things. So maybe that's the wrong question that we're asking. Maybe the question is, what do I want to get good at? If you want to get good at it, that's probably more in your area of strength.
Like what's drawing your energy and your attention. Yeah. Fabulous. Great. And thank you, Jenny. Anonymous, do you subscribe to the philosophy of making decisions on a small scale that make you happy, or making longer term decisions with a goal in mind?
Ooh. So I'm going to be a real cop out and say both, because there's a really good book. I've got it on my bookshelf. It's called Happier, and it's by the guy Tal Ben-Shahar, who I think wrote this course at I think it was Stanford. It's one of their most popular courses ever about happiness and happiness, basically. And he talks about things being like junk food. So he used to be a squash champion, and he did really well, became the national champion. And in order to train for it, he ate really, really well for 6 months before. The night that he won the award, he went to a hamburger joint, got the biggest burger he could, and thought, right, I'm just about to eat this burger because I can. And he thought, why would I eat this? It gives me short-term pleasure, but long-term no gain at all. Now, lots of us spend a lot of time either doing stuff for short-term gain that give us no long-term gain, or the other way around. We eat celery thinking, well, this will be good for me long-term, but I'm really not happy now. That's no good either. What we're sort of looking for is stuff that actually will make us happy now, but also can give us some long-term gain. And it's finding those things that are in the sort of sweet spot about that. So, do stuff, learn skills that you really enjoy learning, but will also may be helpful to you in the future. And that's a win-win. So I would say both. And of course, there's things that, we've got to live now. We've got to be happy in the moment. Actually, if you are happy in the moment, you'll probably be happier long term and make better decisions anyway. But, it's just gauging up, this opportunity, this thing I'm doing, is it going to help the long term? Because if it's not, and it's just going to make me happy now, is that the best decision? But then don't do something if it's not going to make you happy now, even if it will make you happy in the future, if it's going to make you really, really miserable now.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess it also links a little bit to what we said about trying to make your current circumstances as happy as possible, whilst also perhaps having a longer term plan that you're moving towards. So yeah, sort of, again, a bit of both. Yeah,
and often it's just really small things that you can change about things. They don't have to be massive changes, it can be little things.
Identifying those things. And you talked about the performance diamond, about trying to keep them balanced. That will probably help there. Yeah. Another question then. Loads of questions. Lovely. Thank you. Really enjoying listening tonight. Thank you. Do you believe in taking risks with your career?
Ooh.
Short question, quite a big one though.
Yeah, go on, Nick. You can answer that first.
Well, I think part of the answer to that would be it depends upon your current circumstance. Yeah. So, if for instance, when I graduated, I'd be much more free and easy to take quite significant risks with whatever it might be, jobs or travel or, whatever it might be, salary. Whereas nowadays I've got a mortgage and kids. So it really does depend upon, how your current circumstances allow for, a risky move.
Yeah.
If you've got certain things in your life that are required and you can't just, throw things away, take a huge risk, then think about side hustles, think about doing things more gradually, think about what the steps and stages might be to get you there in a less risky way. So it really depends, I think, upon your circumstances would be my take on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think taking calculated risks, yes. Often the thing that stops us taking these career changes is not because it's too risky, but because we have our own blockers, and it's a self-confidence thing, it's a self-belief thing, with fear of failure, all those sorts of things. What if I do something and I'm no good at? Well, you're not going to know till you try. Yeah. So having this growth mindset, and Carol Dweck has written a really good book about growth mindset, is really good. The thing that holds us back often isn't because of the risks, it's because we have a fear of failure and looking silly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And asking yourself, what if I don't do it? How are you going to feel looking back?
And I think most of the decisions I've made in my life, they felt like massive things at the time, like, oh, is this the right decision? Is it wrong? And not once have I ever looked back and gone, that was the wrong decision. Now, I might not still be doing the thing that I made the decision to change to, but it's always been a stepping stone to something else. Yeah. That's what I found. I don't know if you found that, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, and I've taken a few risks and felt comfortable with all of them in the long term. But again, they were always calculated. If they didn't pay off, the world was still going to be there. Everything was still going to be okay. So
Yeah.
it's about getting that balance, I would think. But most things, are within those sorts of boundaries. I think related to that as a question here, just a little bit further down from Yusuf. And I'm sorry I can't answer everyone. Apologies. I'm trying to pick the best ones as I go here. There's so many questions, which is really nice. Thanks, Rachel and Nick. Quick question. How do you build up the resilience and optimism that is needed for a career change? And you'll notice I'm picking the short questions, people. So if you can keep your questions fairly short, it makes my life easier too.
Yeah. Resilience. How do you build up the resilience? I think it's this willingness to try stuff and to fail. That's really at the heart of this, because I think a lot of the definition of resilience is someone who can bounce back, or actually I've heard the definition of resilience is someone who can fall forward, who can bounce forward. So if you are resilient and you're willing to try stuff and then to pick yourself up and go, that didn't work, let's try something else, that will stand you in good stead. And so how you build that up is by just doing that every day with other stuff at work. Try something you've never tried before. Tomorrow, go into work and volunteer for something that scares the pants off you. That you'd always wanted to do, but you just never put yourself forward for it. Do it. If you practice, if you use that muscle and you practice, obviously as long as it's within your competence, and I'm not saying go and perform brain surgery if you can't, but to volunteer to do that project that you've always held back from, and that will just, you'll then practice doing it. And then there's all the things about, the other things about resilience, actually get focused, look at your productivity, all those things that all are multifaceted and can all really help towards this sort of thing.
Fab. I'm just clocking time, so we'll probably start wrapping up in a minute, but I'll try and ask a couple more questions then before we do that. El Harmon. Hi, Rachel and Nick. I was wondering how you identify if your stress is linked to being out of your comfort zone, but is therefore good, just like you talked about actually, or is a bad stress and you feel overstretched. So I guess what they're referencing there is stress can be good and bad, and how do you kind of unpick the two if you're feeling it?
Yeah, one tool that I use that's quite helpful, and you want to Google this, is the Yerkes-Dodson curve, often called the stress performance curve. And it's basically, again, two axes. You've got performance on one, you've got pressure on the other. And actually, it's pressure along the x-axis and performance on the y-axis. And actually, as the pressure increases, so does your performance. So we need a bit of stress and a bit of pressure to perform. But as you go along a little bit, as the pressure gets more and more and more, your performance will start to drop off. Okay, and you'll start to really perform not so well. So you could actually just look at that curve and see where you think you are on it. Do you think you're at peak performance, where the pressure is just right for you to perform? In which case, that's good stress. That's stress that's, or is it, are you starting to drop off that and it's so not good, and it's actually not so good for you? In which case, what can you do to get yourself back to peak performance? And that's healthy stress. I think, anything that's causing you to ruminate about it, if you're starting to getting symptoms of waking up early in the morning, you're getting palpitations, all those symptoms of stress, then that's probably not very good for you. But a little bit of stress is.
There must be a bit of a link between stress and excitement too. They're kind of quite related, aren't they, sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we need, before a project or a performance or a talk or something, you need a little bit of adrenaline going around. The problem is when it's going around all the time.
Yeah. So last question then, and I'm sorry if we didn't get around to yours. How would you go about choosing between two careers? I'm currently studying for my dream job, which is veterinary, as a second degree, but not sure whether it's right for me anymore. And I'm also passionate about conservation, says Anonymous. Choosing between two options. Any advice there, Rachel?
Oof. That's an interesting one, because I'm already thinking, having, do you have to choose between the two careers?
Well, there is veterinary conservation as well, so you could maybe combine. Yeah, interesting.
I think it's very difficult to answer that. I think in that situation, I would spend some time probably with a career coach trying to unpick that. And it depends how far you may want to get your degree and then use that in conservation. You may want to carry on all the way through, because I know you've got to do sort of pre-registration, you've got to do quite a lot of clinical to be fully qualified, don't you? So I think it depends. it's not something I can answer very quickly, and it's quite individual. What would you say, Nick?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had there have been a few instances in my life actually where I've had two options on the table, and it's really hard to choose between the two. And it's a really practical thing that helped me. And these were different options for you. I recognize veterinary is multiple year commitment you're making right now. I was choosing between this job or that job right now, which is a bit different. But for me, I built basically like a matrix. I said, what are the key things between the two jobs? You know, location, pay, training, yada, yada, yada. Okay. And then I sort of played them off against each other. I said, well, what's more important? Is it location or pay? Is it location and training? Is it pay and training? And so, within each one of those kind of two trade-offs, I wrote down what was the most important one. So, for instance, you know, between location and pay, what's more important to me right now? It was the location, actually. I wanted to be in, at that time it was the UK. It was between UK and New Zealand I was trying to choose. So I kind of did the trade-off between all the different potential trade-offs, and it allowed me to look at the picture as a whole and say, well, actually, this job here is providing, you know, more for what I need right now than the other one. And you can actually produce like a ranked order. You say, well, location was mentioned most times, pay was mentioned 2 or 3 times, and training was mentioned once. Therefore, location is the most important thing to me right now in my career. Therefore, I'm going to go towards the one which provides the location that's most important to me. I've not described that really well. I can send you more details of how we do that, but I call it a decision matrix. And it helps me a lot, actually. Unpick the difference between the two options, find what's the most important one of those options, and then which job therefore is providing best for those needs. That's as clearly or unclearly as I can possibly say it. But yeah, thank you. It's a big question, and we wish you the best with that decision as well. Yeah. And thank you, Rachel. That was really, really useful, interesting, thoughtful, a happy career creating hour. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy, and your knowledge with us. It's been really fun, and it's really nice to reconnect as well after a few years.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thank you so much for having me, and just good luck, everybody, with your career transitions. Yeah, I wish you well.
Likewise, yeah. And if people wanted to find out a little bit more about you, Rachel, or if you've got any useful tools that you'd like to share, where should we send them, or what should we tell them?
So what we'll do is we'll give everyone a link to the Thrive Week Planner, which if you just sign up, you can then download that and just use that as a matrix to plan your ideal week. And that will start to help, you know, explore a little bit about what you want. I have a podcast called You Are Not a Frog. So it's for people in high stress jobs who want to make those little changes to make themselves a bit happier at work. So if you're interested, do listen to that. And I'm going to get Nick onto the podcast as well. You can connect with me on Twitter at Dr. Rachel Morris. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Rachel Morris. And my email address is rachel@wildmonday.co.uk. So really happy, you know, if people got further questions, want to email me about any of this, really happy to talk to people if they'd like to. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Nick.
That's great. That's great. We'll put all that in the show notes too. We will send out the recording, people. So if you want to watch this again, you know, you can watch it again. And if you missed this and you're watching it again, you already know we have a recording. But anyway, we'll send the links out as well and put it out on our website. Thanks again, Rachel. Really nice to see you. Nice to talk. Nice to connect. Thank you, everyone, for being online, staying up wherever it might be, super early, super late, or perhaps a reasonable hour too. And thanks for all your questions and interviews. And good luck in your careers. I hope you find greater happiness. And thanks for coming to Conservation Careers. It's nice to have you with us. Okay, well, we'll see you in the next webinar. We're not quite sure. Oh, no, we do know what that is, actually, but I won't announce that quite yet, but it's going to be a good one. Okay. See you soon. Thank you again, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.